In this video lecture, we'll be talking about the background information you need before you start Lab 1. We'll look at how modern research in cognitive psychology relies on the dependent measures of reaction time and errors, and we'll look at how these two measures are correlated. We'll then discuss structural and process models, focusing on the process model of Sternberg. Sternberg's experiment will be the subject of your first lab. Modern research in cognitive psychology, as I mentioned in the first video lecture, depends heavily on the measurement of reaction time. Accuracy is also important in measuring the level of performance of a number of cognitive processes, particularly memory. If you recall, we talked about a task called the sentence verification task in the first video lecture. In this task, participants are presented with a very simple statement that they have to confirm the validity of. The example we looked at was the difference in time it took to confirm that a canary can fly and a canary can breathe. When doing research in memory, we more often rely on accuracy as a measure. Now, this is a graph of the classical serial position curve that you probably saw in your introductory psychology class. This is a measure of memory performance or memory accuracy as a function of where in the list a word occurred. You might recall this U-shaped function represents the serial position curve, where words at the beginning of the list are remembered better than words in the middle of the list, which are remembered more poorly than words at the end of the list. Reaction time and accuracy are very closely related, however. You've probably noticed that when you try to do something too quickly, you tend to make a lot of errors. And if you try to do something very accurately, it can become very time-consuming. Let's consider an example of an experiment where the relationship between reaction time and accuracy might play a role. Say we've developed a new neuroenhancer. A neuroenhancer is a drug that helps you perform better at cognitive tasks. So we want to test this neuroenhancer using a lexical decision task. A lexical decision task is a simple task used frequently in cognitive psychology where a participant is presented with a character string. For example, the participant then decides as quickly as possible if that character string was a word. So in this case, they would respond word. If I had presented this character string, they would have responded non-word. We then measure the time it takes people to do these lexical decisions. Some will give a neuroenhancer to, and some will give a placebo drug to. Let's consider the different patterns of reaction time and errors we might get from this experiment. Result A. This is the ideal result. Let's consider this first column our placebo group and this second column our experimental group. We can see that our experimental group is 100 milliseconds faster at making a lexical decision, and our neuroenhanced group also makes fewer errors. This is the ideal result because our effect occurs both in reaction time, in terms of speeded processing, and also in error rates, in terms of more accurate processing. Either of these results would probably be okay as well. In result B, we still have a difference in the reaction time it takes with our neuroenhanced group being faster than our control group, and there's no difference in error rates. So it's not like the effect that we have here is due to our neuroenhanced group trying to respond more quickly at the cost of being more accurate. The two groups are equally accurate. This result is a little trickier because you can see there's no difference in the reaction time between the neuroenhanced group and the control group. However, if we look, we can see that the neuroenhanced group has a very low error rate, whereas the control group has a much higher error rate. So we can actually argue here that the neuroenhanced group is performing better than the control group, because even though the reaction times are the same, in that time interval, they're able to make much more accurate discriminations. The result that we really don't want to see is result D. Here we have the desired reaction time difference with our neuroenhanced group being faster than our placebo group, but if we look at the error rates, we can see that this faster reaction time has come at a cost in accuracy. Our neuroenhanced groups are making 3 times as many errors as our control group. In this type of result, we really can't trust this reaction time means that our neuroenhanced group is showing an improved performance. It may just mean that it's some kind of stimulant that's making them respond faster, and with that faster responding, we have higher error rates. Researchers have traced the correlation between accuracy and time. How much accuracy do you use when you respond faster and faster, and how much time do you lose if you respond more accurately? The function looks like this. If we look at accuracy, say maximum accuracy, if you were doing a lexical decision task, that would be 100% accuracy, down to chance accuracy. If you were just guessing at your lexical decisions, you'd make 50% accuracy. And then we plot that with reaction time, either very fast reaction times or very slow reaction time. We can see that the relationship between accuracy and response time has this logarithmic shape. First of all, if you respond very, very fast, you're only going to have chance accuracy. And if you respond very, very slow, you can have maximum accuracy. We might get these results if we had an extreme accuracy emphasis in our instructions, where we told them we wanted them to make their lexical decisions quickly, but it was most important that they were always correct. We then see them responding more slowly but with higher accuracy. Normally what we instruct participants to do in a reaction time experiment is to respond as quickly but as accurately as possible. I know those two things are in conflict, but we're trying to reach some theoretical definition of responding as quickly as possible without slowing down to an extreme measure to maximize accuracy. We normally look for an accuracy range around 90 to 95%. If we just had a moderate speed emphasis where we told participants that we really wanted them to respond quickly and to not worry about errors, what we would find then is that their reaction time would speed up and their error rates would start to accumulate as well. If we told them to go super fast, or if we made them go really, really fast before they really had a chance to do much processing, we'd find that their accuracy was dropped even further. So this nice logarithmic function plots out that whole range of relationships that we can have between accuracy and response time. We call these speed accuracy trade-offs, and in result D, in the previous example, we had an issue where we appeared to have a reaction time difference that was actually due to a trade-off between accuracy and time. Your textbook defines models as representations used to help explain structures and processes. Cognitive psychology is very interested in the structure and processes involved in both the neuroscience and the cognitive aspects of our mental activity. Structural models are defined as representations of physical structure. Quite often, structural models are used to describe neurological structures. For example, this is a wire diagram of our entire visual system. Input coming from the eyes into this end, and then higher and higher, and different types of processing. Our visual brain at the back of our head has over 40 different areas used for processing visual information. This is the more traditional type of structural model in the brain. This one is the pain matrix, and it shows the various brain structures that are engaged when we are experiencing pain. Cognitive psychology then uses these representations to help explain structure and processes, and models are very important in cognitive psychology. Process models we can define as representations of the processes that are involved in cognitive mechanisms, where we use boxes to represent specific processes. So for example, your textbook uses Atkinson and Shiffrin's 1969 modal model of memory as an example. Here we can see that there is a flow of processing that starts and passes through 3 different memory systems. The first memory system is called sensory memory. It's just a buffer that holds sensory information for a brief period of time while we get ready to process it. Once that information is collected, we then move to short-term memory. Short-term memory is the part of your memory that is currently active in your conscious awareness. Whatever you're thinking of right now, that's what's in your short-term memory. We can use rehearsal to hold information in short-term memory, and we make all of our responses out of short-term memory because it's the active part of our memory. Today we tend to refer to this structure as working memory because it really represents our work table or our desktop that we're currently addressing. And finally, we have long-term memory. Things in short-term memory can be passed on to long-term memory for permanent storage. We can also draw up memories from long-term memory into our conscious awareness. That is short-term memory. Say we were interested in how long-term memory was structured. We'll look at this in Chapter 7. Long-term memory is thought to have different components. Episodic memories are the memories we have for life events. Semantic memories are the memories we have for facts. And procedural memories are the memories we have about how to do things. So again, we can consider this a process model because we're looking at the different processes involved in long-term memory. Episodic processes, semantic processes, and procedural processes. Sternberg presented a process model to try to represent how we search for information in our short-term memory. In this experiment, and the experiment that you'll be participating in as part of Lab 1, a participant is presented with a memory set, 1 to 6 letters. In this case, let's say the letters B, V, K, and G. They get to look at the letters for a brief period of time, and then the computer screen would go blank and a single letter is presented, in this case the letter K. What the research participant must do is indicate as quickly as possible whether they remember that letter as being part of the original memory set of letters. In this case, since the original memory set had the letter K in it, the participant would respond yes as quickly as possible. The size of this memory set then can vary from 1 to 6. Sternberg proposed the following process model to explain how participants would do this task. So you start with having your memory set already stored in short-term memory, and then you're presented with the letter probe. Timer starts, and the first thing you have to do is do the necessary visual processing to get that letter K recognized. Once you've done that, then you can move into short-term memory and do some kind of scanning and comparison with that memory set to try to determine whether or not the K is there. You then need to reach a binary decision, yes or no, and then execute the correct motor response. Perhaps you will respond with a key to the left if the letter is present and a key to the right if the present is absent. But you need to plan that motor response as well. Now on every trial, regardless of how big the memory set size is, encoding the probe, making a decision, and executing a motor response should be equal in the time it takes them. There's no reason to expect executing a motor response would be longer if you had 6 items in your original memory set. Likewise, there's no reason why coming up with a binary decision, yes, no, it's present, would take any longer if you had 6 items and 1 items. And encoding the probe, you only have a single item anyway, so there's, again, no reason to expect the size of the memory set to affect that component. However, the scanning and comparison component, this part of the process, might take longer if you have more items that you have to compare. Sternberg looked at 3 different ways in which this scanning might occur. First, perhaps you scan short-term memory in a parallel fashion, where you search all the items at the same time, and if the item is present, it would just pop out and you would make your response. This type of search would predict that there would be no difference in reaction time for having one item or 6 items. Because you're searching them all at the same time, it doesn't matter how many items, that one item will just pop out. Furthermore, there'd be no reason to expect any difference between present and absent trials, or at least not much of a difference. There are 2 types of serial searching you could do. First, you could do a serial search where you stop searching as soon as you find the letter. So in the previous example, you'd be searching through that memory set for the letter K. As soon as you find the letter K, then you stop searching. Now, if you're doing a serial search, you will expect to have an effect of memory set size, because the more items that you have to search through, the longer it'll take you. But there's a further difference that we should also see between present and absent trials. If the target is not there, then you'll have to search every single item to make sure it's not there. But if the target is there, then on average, you'll only have to go halfway through before you find it. Oh sure, there'll be some trials where you have to search all of them, but then there'll be other trials where it's the first item you search. So on average, you'll only have to do half as much searching. And that means that you should see a difference in the slope of these 2 functions. The slope for no should be twice as steep as the slope for yes. A third type of search that could happen is serial exhaustive search. And here what happens is you don't stop if you find it. The search process is thought to be ballistic. Once you start it, you have to go to the end of the list even if you find the item. In which case, what we should find is that there will be an effect of memory set size. You'll be slower the more items you have to search through, but there'll be no difference between no and yes responses, because in both cases you've searched to the end of the list of letters. This is the results that Sternberg found. If you look at these results, you can see first here the black dots represent yes responses, the open symbols represent no responses. The line here is the average of the 2, but if you go down the different memory set sizes, you can see that the responses for yes and no are almost identical. And in fact, this graph looks very much like the graph we just saw for serial exhaustive searching. Sternberg, in fact, concluded that the process of searching through short-term memory was a serial exhaustive process based on these results. There are assumptions that underlie processing models, and these are important and are often form the basis of a criticism of research that relies on these types of models. One of the assumptions is that these sequential stages of processing, like we saw in Sternberg's model, occur on every trial. So every time a participant is faced with this task, they will go through the encoding, searching, decision-making, and response execution stages. It's also thought that these stages are independent and non-overlapping. And what that means is that any stage is assumed to have been completed before you start the next stage. So you don't start making that decision about whether or not the target is present until you have completed the search stage. And you don't execute your response until you have completed the decision stage. This leads to some difficulties. First of all, it ignores completely parallel processing. There are lots of processes that we have that likely occur simultaneously. Why do we have to assume that you can't make a decision until you've completely searched through the items? It seems to me that as you search through the items and continually fail to find the target that you are looking for, you might lean more and more towards a no response. So you may actually be making your decision while you're searching. And unfortunately, in these types of models, it kind of ignores that type of simultaneously operating processes. Secondly, there are context effects. In cognitive psychology, we refer to these as priming effects. But we know that if you perform the same task twice in a row, you will almost always be faster at doing it the second time. We call this repetition priming. It's easier to process a stimulus a second time after you've just processed it. These types of processing models that have sequential stages of processing really can't account for how these context effects, how these priming effects occur. There are other problems as well. This type of research relies almost exclusively on reaction time data. It's always nice to be able to confirm your results to test your hypotheses using other dependent measures. And secondly, another problem is that they really work poorly for higher level cognitive processes, things like problem solving, logical reasoning, and decision making. You are now ready to start Lab 1.